The Veiled Dominion's war banners stretched across the void like bloodstains, their fleet assembled in silent formation before a trembling colony world. Admiral Kathir Velos watched the planet's defenses buckle beneath precision bombardments. His officers did not cheer, they had long since grown numb to such spectacles. The slaughter of weaker civilizations was not war, merely administration. Kathir himself barely felt a flicker of interest as another city crumbled on his tactical screen. The prey here was too fragile to offer any challenge, and challenge was the only thing that still gave his long career purpose. He turned away from the display and asked with a trace of boredom, "What lies beyond this sector?" A young officer answered promptly, almost eager to recite. "Several unclaimed systems, Admiral. Our surveyors mention a primitive bipedal species inhabiting one of the outer worlds. Iron-rich, atmosphere-compatible, but technologically stagnant. No significant military." Kathir's mouth curved into the shadow of a smile. Primitive bipeds. How many times had he heard those words, always preluding the same tiresome ritual: burn their ships, shatter their cities, enslave their remnants. It was too predictable, yet the council demanded expansion, and he obeyed. "Very well," he said. "Send a detachment. Sweep them aside. Perhaps their trinkets amuse us." Within the Dominion fleet, the order carried the weight of inevitability. A raiding squadron peeled away, their drives igniting like cold suns as they slipped toward Sol. The Admiral did not give them another thought. There was nothing to fear in a people who still scraped in the mud of their own gravity well. The alien fleet's approach was noticed, of course, but not with the panic Kathir might have expected. Across Earth's deep space monitoring stations, officers watched the long-range signatures cross into the system with quiet precision. No alarms rang in crowded cities, no frantic evacuations. Instead, a calm order was relayed through encrypted channels, and one by one, concealed defense grids awoke in silence. On the bridge of the Eidolon, a Terran vessel hidden against the lunar horizon, Commander Arya Solin studied the incoming readings. Her dark eyes betrayed no fear, only the sharp patience of someone waiting for a clock to strike. "They took the bait," she murmured, noting the alien formation curving toward the outer colonies. "Exactly on schedule." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Callan, frowned. "It feels strange, letting them burn through the decoys. People are going to think." "No one's thinking anything," Arya cut in, her tone even but firm. "Those colonies were empty for a reason. Every transmission is ghosted, every habitat stripped before they ever arrived. Let them destroy husks. We've given them a stage, and they believe they're the audience." There was a silence between them, heavy but not uncertain. Callan nodded slowly. "And when they reach Earth?" Arya allowed herself a thin, dry smile. "Then we close the curtain." Far beyond, the alien raiders fell upon what they believed to be vulnerable stations orbiting Jupiter. Plasma cascades tore apart rotating habitats, their metallic frames shattering like glass. Yet there were no screams, no distress signals, no fleeing ships. The alien commander on scene hesitated only for a breath, then dismissed the quiet as fear-struck paralysis. He had seen it before, creatures frozen before the inevitability of conquest. His fleet pressed on, burning each installation with perfunctory efficiency. Kathir received the battle reports with expected indifference. He scanned them while sipping a darkened draft that passed for wine among his kind. The colonies had offered no resistance. As projected. Still, a faint detail gnawed at him. Silence. Prey usually howled before the end. There was satisfaction in breaking them. But here there was only absence, as though no life had been there at all. He dismissed the thought. Primitive bipeds. Hardly worth analysis. His officers awaited his next command, and he would not indulge superstition. "Proceed," he ordered. "Secure their homeworld. I want this done before the Council convenes again." By the time the Dominion fleet crossed Saturn's orbit, every major Terran military branch had been fully briefed. Still, the world spun, as though untouched. Children played in parks, markets buzzed, oceans surged against their shores. News feeds spoke of storms and elections, not the shadow of alien invasion. It was not ignorance but orchestration. Panic was the weapon of the weak. Humanity had long decided it would not serve them. Inside a subterranean command nexus beneath the Rockies, a gathering of Earth's defense leaders stood around a holographic projection of the system. The alien fleet glowed crimson against the black grid. General Havelock, broad-shouldered and grizzled, watched with the expression of a man who had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. They're arrogant, he said softly. Predictable. That's their weakness. A civilian advisor, pale with suppressed unease, asked, "And ours?" Havelock's eyes narrowed. Patience. Nothing more. In orbit, as the alien fleet closed the gap to Earth, the air grew taut with anticipation. On Cathir's flagship, officers reported their progress in clipped tones, trying to mask their unease at the quiet void around them. No defenders had emerged, no signals challenged them. It felt less like a conquest and more like stepping into a theater where unseen eyes watched from the darkened seats. The Admiral's jaw tightened. Primitive or not, they know we are here. Their silence will not save them. When the blue sphere of Earth filled their displays, the bridge crew exhaled in something like awe. Beautiful, fertile, vulnerable. Cathir felt the stirrings of satisfaction at last. He raised his hand to signal the first strike, then froze as a soft tremor rippled through his ship. Not an impact, not a system fault. Something else. Something deliberate. On the Eidolon, Commander Arya received confirmation from her tactical officer. Hidden defense satellites, long silent, had just synchronized. The net was in place. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them with steel. Transmit on wideband. Her voice carried across the void, calm, clipped, undeniably human. Unidentified fleet, you are trespassing in Terran sovereign space. You were warned. This is your only notice. The Dominion fleet went suddenly, eerily still. No one had ever spoken to them like that before, unshaken, unhurried, utterly unafraid. Cathir stared at the calm feed, and for the first time in many years of conquest, he felt the faintest thread of unease tighten in his chest. The silence that followed was worse than defiance. It was the silence of someone holding a blade behind their back, waiting for you to step closer. And still, Earth turned below, serene, as though daring him to strike. The first barrage from the Dominion fleet lanced downward, spears of plasma striking orbital installations that seemed too brittle to resist. Human satellites cracked apart in silence, fragments scattering into the dark like brittle shells. Admiral Cathir allowed himself a breath of satisfaction as he watched the projections flare crimson. Yet the faint tremor of unease from earlier had not left him. It persisted like a taste of iron in the back of his throat, one he could not spit away. Something in the rhythm of this world felt rehearsed. On the hidden command deck beneath the Rockies, General Havelock leaned closer to the glowing display. Each destroyed satellite appeared on the board exactly where his analysts had predicted they would fall. There was no alarm in the room, only confirmation. He did not smile, but there was grim satisfaction in the set of his jaw. Let them spend their firepower, he said. Every strike tells us more about their targeting sequence. Keep them dancing. Commander Arya Solon, observing from her vantage aboard the Eidolon, was less impassive. The cool discipline of her voice masked the steady rhythm of her pulse, but she felt the strain in her chest. Watching her decoys fall felt like sacrificing children, even knowing they were empty husks. She steadied herself with the reminder that this was war in its truest form, control of perception. "They're still convinced we're weaker," she murmured. "Good. That illusion is worth more than any fortress." Within the Dominion flagship, officers celebrated the easy kills, their pride bleeding into arrogance. Cathir silenced them with a glance. He could not shake the peculiar chill from the enemy's earlier broadcast. Primitive species begged, wept, or screamed. These humans had spoken as though issuing a border regulation, no tremor of fear, no hint of awe. He found himself returning to the recording, replaying the clipped words. "You were warned. This is your only notice." He wondered whether the phrase was bravado, or the kind of certainty that comes from hidden strength. A new tremor shook the vessel, sharper this time. The Admiral's eyes widened. One of his destroyers had blossomed into a sudden bloom of debris. The ship had not been struck by any visible projectile. The sensor readout revealed the truth. An invisible kinetic slug had punched clean through its hull at velocities his systems could barely register. Another tremor, another ship gone. Panic rippled across the Dominion fleet. The humans had not fired grand volleys or blinding energy beams. Instead, they had fired precise, single shots from railguns buried in shadow, weapons that left no trace until the instant of annihilation. The effect was surgical. "Admiral," cried one of his officers. "Unknown origin, firing solutions appear to come from lunar orbit, possibly hidden emplacements." "Find them." Cathir snapped, though he already knew the futility, in his voice. For every suspected emplacement targeted, 3 more revealed themselves in perfect coordination. His fleet was not being attacked, it was being dissected. On the Eidolon, Arya kept her voice level as she ordered the next phase. Initiate GhostNet. Collapse their comm lattice. Her technicians executed the command with quiet efficiency, and within moments the Dominion fleet's long-range communications with their empire went dark. The Admiral's calls for reinforcement would vanish into static. Lieutenant Callan let out a low exhale. "We've got them. The knife's in." "Not yet," Arya said. "They still don't understand what they've walked into. And fear, Callan, is a weapon best sharpened slowly." Back on the Dominion flagship, Kithir stared in disbelief as his tactical displays flickered, jammed, and finally dissolved into meaningless blurs of static. For the first time in his career, he felt blind. The enemy knew where every one of his ships drifted, yet he could not even locate the source of their strikes. He tasted bitterness. Not fear, not yet, but the sour taste of losing control. Desperate for clarity, he ordered a full sweep of the humans' transmissions. A cache of data spilled across his consoles, drawn from intercepted channels. Most of it was baffling, a chaos of languages, symbols, images. But his analysts extracted something coherent, ancient footage. Humans in primitive uniforms charging across trenches. Smoke, mud, and fire. Cities in flames under mushroom clouds. Armored vehicles grinding over ruins. His officers laughed uneasily. To them, it was quaint, an archive of brutality from a pre-spacefaring people. Yet Kithir did not laugh. He studied the human wars in silence, replaying battle after battle. There was no glory in their faces, no honor-seeking in their methods. They fought to exhaust, to starve, to destroy utterly. Their history was an unbroken sequence of conflict, each war birthing another. Even when their enemies were their own kind, they pursued annihilation with unwavering commitment. One image lingered on his screen, a city consumed in fire, tens of thousands erased in a single instant. His throat tightened. This was not the history of innocence. It was the history of predators who had learned long ago that survival demanded cruelty. Perhaps they had not been unprepared. Perhaps they had been waiting, hidden behind the illusion of fragility, for the moment someone was foolish enough to strike first. "Admiral," his first officer whispered, his usual bravado stripped away. "This is not a primitive race. This is a species bred by war itself." Kithir did not answer at once. He forced himself to study Earth again on his view screen, that serene blue sphere turning below as though untouched by the violence unraveling in orbit. His mind recoiled at the possibility, but the evidence pressed against him like a weight. Humanity had been ready. They had been patient. They had let his fleet come to them. And now, piece by piece, they were showing the Dominion that every assumption was false. Another ripple struck the flagship, sending the deck quivering beneath his feet. Emergency reports cascaded across his console. Another cruiser gone, another dreadnought crippled. He clenched his fists until his claws bit into his palms. The arrogance of centuries, the certainty of empire, was slipping like sand through his grasp. And in the silence that followed, the human commander's voice returned. Not triumphant, not mocking, merely calm, like a teacher reminding a stubborn pupil. "You were warned. Cease your approach, or you will not leave orbit alive." The Dominion fleet froze in collective dread. For the first time in living memory, they were the ones being given terms. Kithir's breath caught, and with it came a revelation more terrifying than the enemy's weapons. He was beginning to believe them. Admiral Kithir's request for reinforcements traveled into silence. No signal pierced the ghost net humanity had wrapped around his fleet. The Dominion's empire-wide lattice of communication, so reliable it had become a matter of faith, had been severed as though by a surgeon's scalpel. He stood rigid on his command deck, his jaw locked against the rising tide of unease he refused to name. Across from him, officers whispered of superstition, of human sorcery. He silenced them with a look, though he could not silence the weight settling over his own heart. The High Council of the Dominion did not yet share his fear. Far from the front, in their golden chambers, suspended over a world carved hollow by conquest, they debated the matter with indulgent detachment. The human strike against Kithir's fleet was acknowledged, yes, but dismissed as an aberration, an ambush, a trick of luck, nothing more. They had crushed hundreds of species. One more upstart would not bend the arc of empire. Some scoffed outright, asking if Kithir had grown old, too cautious to wield the authority given to him. One world cannot unmake an empire, the speaker declared, his voice rippling through the chamber like iron. Kithir pleaded through the fractured relay that remained. He described the precision of the human strikes, the eerie calm of their warnings, the ancient violence woven into their history. "You do not understand," he told them, voice hoarse. "This is not prey. This is predator disguised as prey." But pride was an armor the council would not shed. They ordered him to hold his ground and promised reinforcements. Behind their words, Kithir heard what they truly meant: prove the Dominion's supremacy or die showing it. When the Second Fleet arrived, 1,000 ships strong, sleek with Dominion arrogance, the void between worlds grew tense with expectation. The humans did not respond immediately. Earth turned in silence, cities gleaming as though no war loomed above. For the briefest moment, hope flickered among the Dominion crews. Perhaps the humans had exhausted their tricks. Perhaps the First Fleet's humiliation had been a lucky strike. Then the void tore open. Wormholes unfolded like silent wounds in space, and from them poured Terran vessels unlike anything the Dominion had charted. They were not grand battleships ornamented with banners of conquest. They were lean, angular machines, built without ceremony, only function. They did not challenge the Dominion head-on. Instead, they scattered with uncanny precision, striking at supply lines, carving apart escorts, vanishing again before counterfire could find them. Kithir felt his stomach twist as he watched the pattern. This was no wild flailing, no desperate resistance. It was calculation. Every Dominion weakness mapped, every movement anticipated. Humanity fought as though they had studied the Dominion for centuries. Perhaps they had. On the Eidolon, Arya Solon gave her orders in a voice so calm it seemed out of place amid the storm. Target logistics first. Do not waste fire on their flagships until their stomachs are empty. She did not need to raise her voice. Her crew leaned into her steadiness, drawing strength from it. Where other commanders might have gloried in the destruction of enemy vessels, Arya spoke of resources, attrition, inevitability. To her, war was not performance. It was arithmetic. General Havelock, watching from Earth's command nexus, echoed the philosophy with grim pride. "Glory gets soldiers killed," he told his aides as they tracked the slaughter unfolding above. "We're not here for spectacle. We're here to end threats before they can think of beginning again." He allowed himself one fleeting smile as another Dominion carrier broke apart, venting fire into the void. Efficiency is mercy, is the fastest way to stop this. The Dominion did not understand. Their war doctrine was built on intimidation, on overwhelming force, and dazzling shows of power meant to break the will of resistance. Against humans, that doctrine collapsed. Their massive dreadnoughts became targets too slow to adapt, their formations liabilities rather than strengths. They were wielding hammers against a surgeon's blade, and every swing missed. Kithir stood on his bridge as ship after ship blinked into silence. He felt the eyes of his officers upon him, not with accusation, but with the unspoken question no leader wished to hear. What do we do when defeat is inevitable? He had no answer. His orders to regroup dissolved as human wormholes opened in their midst, disgorging swarms of drones that stripped cruisers bare like carrion feeders. His orders to counterattack died as cybernetic strikes turned Dominion fire control into chaos. He was no longer giving commands, he was begging for survival. In the chaos, one thought kept repeating in his mind, circling like a predator itself: they are not trying to impress us. Humans wage war without grandeur. Their broadcasts were clinical, their strikes unadorned. They did not fight to inspire fear through spectacle. They fought to end the enemy, nothing more. That made them more terrifying than any foe he had ever faced. He thought again of the footage he had studied, the muddy trenches, the bombs falling on cities, the mushroom clouds. He had dismissed them as primitive atrocities, relics of a violent past. Now he realized they had been practice. Every horror they had inflicted on one another had been rehearsal for the day an outsider came. On Earth, civilians went about their lives as if no apocalypse raged above. Trains ran, markets thrived, children learned their lessons. It was not ignorance. It was defiance crafted into normalcy. The Dominion sought to break them with fear, but there was no fear to break. Humanity had mastered it long ago. As the Dominion's Second Fleet collapsed, Kithir finally allowed the truth to surface within him. This was not conquest. This was extermination withheld only by the humans' restraint. They could have ended it swiftly, burning every ship in a single coordinated strike. Instead, they were dismantling the Dominion carefully, deliberately, as though teaching a lesson. And Kithir feared he understood the message. You should never have come. When the last surviving Dominion cruiser fled into the dark, crippled and burning, Kithir did not stop it. He knew humanity had allowed it to run, knowing it would carry the story back to the council chambers. Fear was not delivered in words, it was carved into memory. And now the Dominion would remember. The silence after battle was heavier than the battle itself. On the Eidolon, Arya sat in her chair, hands folded neatly, her eyes fixed on earth below. Lieutenant Callan broke the hush. We've won. Arya shook her head. No, we've shown them. That's different. She leaned forward, her voice low, meant only for her crew. Victory is not when they retreat. Victory is when they stop believing they can ever return. Admiral Kithir stared at the wreckage around him, the ruins of fleets that had once represented the pride of an empire. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be hunted. And for the first time, he was not certain the Dominion would survive what it had provoked. The Dominion's High Council gathered in a chamber gilded by centuries of conquest, its walls etched with victories so old they had become myth. But tonight the chamber was not filled with pride. Hushed voices trembled with disbelief, and beneath the polished surface of their rhetoric, fear bled through. Reports from Admiral Kithir's Second Fleet flickered across their displays, thousands of ships reduced to debris, veterans routed not by a peer empire, but by a single species they had dismissed as primitive. Some leaders still scoffed, clinging to denial as though it could shield them from reality. Others argued in rising panic, their voices breaking the ritual calm of the chamber. This is exaggeration, the speaker thundered. One fleet cannot decide the fate of an empire. We have endured greater threats. Kithir's hollow voice carried through the projection link, silencing them. His features were drawn, his eyes dark hollows that had once burned with pride. You have endured nothing like this. You do not understand because you will not listen. Humanity is not resisting us. They are dismantling us. We fight for spectacle, for dominance. They fight only to end the enemy. They will not stop. The chamber erupted in protest. Some demanded another mobilization, others whispered of retreat, but the schism ran deeper than strategy. It was pride against survival, arrogance against reason. Kithir let them rage, his silence louder than their words. He had seen their fleets die, and the sound of metal being torn apart still rang louder than any argument. While the Dominion fractured, Earth remained still. Cities lit the night, oceans glittered beneath the sun, and life moved forward without interruption. Humanity did not celebrate, for celebration belonged to those who sought glory. There was no glory in the efficient killing of invaders. Only necessity. Commander Arya Solon stood in the quiet of her ship's observation deck, watching the stars as if they were an ocean waiting to be crossed. Callan approached, hesitant, the unspoken weight of their victory pressing between them. They'll come again, he said softly. They won't be the same when they do, Arya answered. Her voice carried no triumph, only certainty. We've shown them what we are. Now they have to decide if they want to live with that knowledge or die from it. General Havelock, in the command nexus deep beneath Earth, echoed her sentiment in harsher terms. He spoke to the assembled Defense Council, their faces lit by the pale glow of strategy maps. The Dominion believed they could erase us without consequence. Now they know the truth. We don't want empire, but if empire forces itself upon us, we will burn it down. And we won't gloat. We'll just keep moving forward. The words were carried upward by silence, a silence heavier than applause, because everyone in the room understood the implication. Humanity had awakened, and once awake, they would not sleep again. Admiral Kithir was captured in the aftermath of the third failed incursion, his flagship crippled and boarded with unnerving precision. He expected execution, the ritual display of dominance he would have inflicted on any lesser foe. Instead, he was escorted not to cell, but to a chamber of steel and glass where a human diplomat awaited him. The man was plain, his voice quiet, his eyes unreadable. "We do not seek your destruction," the diplomat said. "But understand this clearly, we will not permit yours of us. You may serve as a liaison. Learn what coexistence requires. If you refuse, we will find another who will." The offer struck Kithir harder than any weapon. Mercy was not what he expected, nor was it relief. It was a reminder of power, so absolute it could afford restraint. In sparing him, humanity bound him more tightly than execution ever could. Alone later, Kithir reflected on the strange dignity of his captors. They had not jeered, had not humiliated. They treated him as though he still possessed some fragment of worth, even as they held the fate of his empire in their hands. That dignity frightened him more than cruelty ever would. Cruelty he could resist, dignity he could not. Word of Dominion defeat spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Species once cowed under their rule whispered of rebellion. Some reached toward humanity as a new axis of power. The Dominion's grip began to loosen, not by human conquest, but by the shattering of belief. What was an empire if its fleets could be broken by those it called primitives? What was Dominion when its subjects no longer fear it? On Earth, no parades filled the streets, no monuments rose. Humanity's leaders spoke not of conquest, but of vigilance. Arya remained with her crew in the silence of orbit, eyes still fixed on the stars. Callan asked her once quietly, "What comes next?" Her gaze did not waver. The galaxy knows us now. The question isn't what comes next. It's whether we can live with what we've shown them. Kithir, too, pondered the question, though from the other side of the blade. He knew his empire would never be the same. Even if it survived, it would carry the scar of humanity's lesson forever. He wondered if mercy had truly been mercy, or if it was the most terrifying form of conquest, subjugation without chains, obedience born of recognition rather than force. The climax came not with a final battle, but with the quiet realization that humanity had already won. They had turned the Dominion's greatest strength, fear, into their own weapon. And now the galaxy itself bent around them, not by choice, but by inevitability. On a night when Earth City shone like constellations against the dark, General Havelock stood alone on a balcony overlooking the lights. He spoke into the silence, words meant for no one and everyone. "We didn't want this, but they forced us. And now the galaxy will have to learn what Earth truly is." Far above, the stars waited, silent witnesses to a truth that could not be undone. Humanity had stopped pretending to be fragile. The masquerade was over, and the universe would never look at them the same way again.